Let's talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team that predictably last season pushed the minutes of their starters down. That's what Kenny Atkinson does. I didn't expect them to be as good as they were, and now their team comes back relatively unchanged. But a few little things we need to talk about. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am a former male cheerleader. That is the word. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. And we are available on all platforms, so subscribe. You can also check out basketballmonster.com. Our projections are up. It links to your league. It customizes for your league. Points leagues, category leagues, whatever your categories, you got it there. We've got the Durant ranking system on there as well. We've got some variance ranges that are coming out for projections as well, not just set numbers. So just be understanding of upsides and downsides, floors and ceilings, all that sort of thing. That'll be coming out this season also on Basketball Monster. We are here to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, so we might as well just get into that part of it right now. To talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm joined by the host of the Locked On Cavs podcast, Danny Cunningham. He's back with me for another year to talk about this Cleveland team, which I mentioned in the intro is relatively stable from a rotation perspective. Their coach was new last season. We know the Kenny Atkinson style. We know this team. I'm pretty sure we're going to know what the starting lineup is. I don't expect there's any change in that versus what we've seen the last couple of seasons. But I guess there are a couple of little things that are going to be important in this when we talk about this squad and where we're at, Danny. First of all, the big question I think most people have is Darius Garland. The injury update, he had some surgery during the offseason. We saw 2 years ago we had a really down season that he copped that whack in the jaw, lost all the weight, and then never really recovered. And the history of Darius Garland, I'm not saying that he is injury prone. He's had injuries, but my more concern is when he has an injury and then he returns, he doesn't seem to perform quite at the same level. It seems like it takes him a bit of time. Obviously more stuff involved with the jaw, but even just other little knees or hamstrings or falling on his back, and he comes back and things just seem to fall off. So where are we at with his toe injury? There was some concern he might not be ready for opening night. Where are we placing him at the moment?
So I would be surprised, Josh, if he plays on opening night. Obviously, the season begins October 22nd for the Cavs. I'd be surprised if he's out there. I'd be surprised if he's out there and playing his normal amount of minutes really in the first few weeks of this season. When the Cavs put out the update, they said 4 to 5 months from surgery. 4 months is basically the start of training camp. 5 months is a couple of weeks into the season. And with what their team aspirations are, where they're going to care much more about the basketball they play in April, May, and June than the basketball they play in October, November, and December, I would imagine that they're going to take a cautious approach with him as far as the start of the season goes. Now, the one thing I will say, because you are right, especially about that jaw injury a couple of years ago where he was never the same guy, I would expect that he does get back to being Darius Garland later in this season, like what you can expect from Darius Garland in terms of the guy he was really before he got injured last year. The first half of the season he had, I thought, was sensational last season. I would expect to see that guy maybe once the calendar flips over to 2026. Like, I think that is more of a fair expectation, but I wouldn't count on him being somebody that is available opening night. I wouldn't count on him being somebody that's going to play 30 plus minutes regularly, really, until we get around Christmas. I think the Cavs should be in a position where they have these postseason goals. Listen, they're going to be a regular season wins machine, whether Garland is out there or not. So I would imagine that they're going to want to do everything with Darius Garland while keeping the postseason in mind.
Look, he only played 31 minutes a night last season, and he was relatively healthy, so I'd be stunned if his season average is over 30. Like, that would be just surprising to me, because I don't know if we talked about this on the preview last season, but I definitely talked about this in my discussion of the Cavs leading up to last season, is like Kenny Atkinson said. He said, we're not playing these guys big minutes. Like, get it out of your head. They're not playing 35 minutes a night. It is not happening. We are giving rests. We are expanding the rotation. We are trusting the bench. And that is exactly what happened. It's one of those ones where you can't always believe what a coach says because they lie all the time. But this one, he said it. He's shown it in the past. They did it again, and they're going to do that same thing again this season. Garland, it's another one of those ones also that Garland had all that weird stuff the year before where people were going, I don't know if he works with Donovan Mitchell. We'd also seen him play with Donovan Mitchell the year prior to that, and he was great, and he played with him, Donovan Mitchell, this season, and you can make an argument at times he played better than Donovan Mitchell during the season. He is an elite level point guard. The problem here is going to be just, they're going to take it slow. I guess my question now on Garland is, where I'm not expecting him opening night. I'm sort of with you, a couple of weeks in, and then they slowly bring him back. They acquired Lonzo Ball in a trade for Isaac Okoro. They lost Ty Jerome. Do you think that they start Lonzo Ball, or do they bring DeAndre Hunter in, slide Donovan Mitchell down, and go with that sort of a slightly bigger setup?
So without Garland, I think that the starting rotation is not going to be set because, you bring up Lonzo Ball, and that was the biggest move they made this offseason. I think it's probably fair to say, but he's somebody that comes with his own injury red flags, right? Like he's played 70 games total in the last 4 years. He played 35 games last year. He played 35 games 4 years ago and nothing in between. So I would anticipate with him that they're going to want to keep his minutes low. They're going to want to maybe not play him in back-to-backs far as like both ends go. I do think that there are going to be some nights where he starts, but I look at that fifth starting spot as a bit of a revolving door. Some nights it might be DeAndre Hunter. I think he makes sense as the starting small forward when the team is fully healthy. The Cavs didn't get to that last year. I think it made sense because when you acquire a guy in the middle of the season, that can be a difficult thing to do. But with Hunter having a full off season and a full training camp upcoming, if the full team is healthy, I think he should be the starting small forward. We'll see if Kenny Atkinson wants to do that. I know organizationally they view Max Strus as a great connector, but I do think it would make sense to have him in the starting lineup, especially if the Cavs maybe want to play a little bit bigger. You could have Max Strus starting as your starting shooting guard, and Donovan Mitchell a lot on his plate as a distributor, but he has shown in the past, you think back to that jaw injury Darius Garland had, the Cavs were great when he was out because Donovan Mitchell was so good at point guard. So that could be an option for them, but I don't have a great answer as to how they're going to play it because I think there are other things up in the air. But I do think it is a very interesting decision that Kenny Atkinson and his staff are going to have to make at the start of the season if Darius Garland is not available.
You bring up that DeAndre Hunter situation. To be honest, I never thought that they would even consider him as a starting option. I thought that Strus was a good fit there. Obviously, Hunter's a lot bigger, and part of my concern with Strus when they signed him was like, I'm not sure he's big enough to guard the three. So I guess that is possible. I have some issues with Hunter and his game in that there are certain things that he doesn't do. Like he'll have a game if the shots don't go in, he shoots 1 of 7, then he's giving you nothing, like literally nothing. He never passes. He's not a good rebounder. The shot is all over the place, but he has the hot streaks and things look good. And I don't know how that fits, but again, we will see. The size is more important for him in that starting group or whether it is Max Strus. Either way, Danny, I think that if it is Strus or if it is Hunter, irrespective of Garland's absence, I think their minutes are going to be very similar either way. It's going to be between 28 and 30, whether you're starting or coming off the bench. I don't really see how much would change in that sort of a scenario. And even the other guy, I guess you could consider that could be an option to start is someone like Sam Merrill, just to give it some extra spacing. He's not going to need the ball in his hands a huge amount, and he's going to just get up a bunch of threes. So that could be another way that they go in that position. I do want to talk about the overall, I guess, structure of this team, the ideas that Kenny Atkinson brought to them and how that impacted the squad. We'll come back and talk about that in a sec. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people, they can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. It might be 401ks, it might be properties, investments, whatever it is. You don't have that full picture. How can you work out whether you're leaving any money on the table? And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. You can link all of your accounts through to Monarch. Spot a few of those subscriptions that you didn't know that you had or you've forgotten were still there. Cancel them out. See what that does to your savings. See how that brings your savings goal. Track stuff with your partner as well, where your spending is. Categorize it. Figure out the way that you can maximize your financial safety and security. Don't let that financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That is 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNBA. NBA. All right, I'm here with Danny Cunningham from Locked On Cavs. We're talking about this Cleveland team that's not expected to have Darius Garland available at the start of the season. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I talked about last season with Kenny Atkinson is we want our health preserved from our guys. We do not want them in a situation where everyone is just exhausted, absolutely banged up when we get to the playoffs. Now, obviously, they still had concerns in the playoffs. Garland ended up getting hurt. We saw players, and I think there'll be some people who look at Donovan Mitchell and go, "Oh yeah, I guess just a bad season, he'll bounce back." But I'm not expecting much to change in terms of the way that Atkinson approaches this, in terms of preservation, in terms of, it's a system that's worked for him through the regular season. Sometimes in the playoffs, you just need luck. But Mitchell played only 31 minutes a night last season. That wasn't because he was bad. It wasn't because he was injured. It's because that's what they want to do. So I don't think that's changing, is it?
I don't think that's going to change much. And the other thing that I would say that led to that, because I do think they would have liked to, near the end of the season, up the minutes a little bit in preparation for the postseason. But the Cavs won so many games by double digits that there were nights where it just didn't make sense to, trot out the starting five in the fourth quarter because they were up by 25 points. I mean, they, in 10-point games last year, they went 41-7. So they had more than half their games were decided by double digits, which I know isn't some crazy stat across the NBA, but I do think that's part of the reason why their numbers or their minutes were as low as they were. That said, they are going to have an eye on the postseason. I think Donovan Mitchell's minutes will probably be 31, 32. I mean, there will be nights where he'll play 35, 36, but that's going to be more of the exception to the rule than the rule. And I think the same for Evan Mobley. I think Jarrett Allen's minutes actually more than anybody might go down a little bit this year, because I do think we would like to see Evan Mobley maybe play a little bit more center. And I also think the fact that the Cavs now have Larry Nance Jr. allows them to be a little bit more flexible with some Evan Mobley lineups that don't have Jarrett Allen in them. So I do wonder if that's a way that the Cavs try and shift things just a little bit. But I think for the most part, the minutes allocation is going to look pretty similar. Yes, the roster is a little bit different, and maybe on nights when Lonzo Ball isn't available, someone like Tyrese Proctor or Craig Porter Jr. gets some run. But I would imagine that for the most part, the high-end players on the Cavs, I think their minutes are going to be below 33 per game if Kenny Atkinson has it his way.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you love how you've preempted my entire third segment by talking about that Jarrett Allen thing, because I think that's really interesting. I think there's something really intriguing about that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But because we look at this, and even with Mitchell, right? Like I talked about, there were times, long stretches of last season where Darius Garland outperformed him. One of the things that did fall off a little bit from Mitchell last season is his 2-point numbers were down. He was at 51% only from two. He'd been seeing a 54. He had a 57 season in there. So that doesn't seem like much, but when you talk about his overall efficiency, his scoring dropping from almost 27 down to 24, it's because he shot under 45% from the field when he'd been over 46 for the two previous seasons. He is, I'm not going to tell you that Donovan Mitchell is old, but he is 29. So you get into that area where the athleticism peak, we've hit the athleticism peak already. So was it a finishing issue? Was it just an unlucky thing? Do you think that there was something about Mitchell, who's obviously undersized, that might not enable him to get that elite level of efficiency back?
So I think part of it was wanting to preserve himself for the postseason, because we were doing this thing in Cleveland where, Donovan Mitchell, and it's like January at this point, Donovan Mitchell has only dunked like 3 times this year. And, we think of Donovan Mitchell as somebody that is a former slam dunk champion, and somebody that, despite only being 6'2" or 6'3", really can get up there with the best of them. And then near the end of the season, he started doing that a little bit more. But I do think that there was some preservation going on with this game. And I also do think, too, there was something to be said about wanting to elevate Evan Mobley. So I understand that the efficiency was down a little bit, but I think the shot selection changed in part because they wanted to make Evan Mobley more of a focal point offensively for this team. Obviously, that did work for him, with him, I think really taking a pretty significant step forward offensively, being somebody that was named second team All-NBA. So I look at those two things and think that that is something that's connected. And then you look at the postseason that Donovan had, and I know the Cavs came up very, very far short of their expectations. I know he wasn't the most efficient player in the world, and I think that was more of an issue from beyond the three-point arc. But I think what we saw in the postseason, with him being able to get to the basket seemingly at will, certainly in that series against the Indiana Pacers, I think that tells me more about the first half of his season last year was more about getting Evan Mobley going, maybe a little bit more about preservation. I think that he still has a lot left in that tank. I know that he is 29 or will be turning 29 shortly here. And I look at him as somebody that this could be the best year of his career. I still think there's a chance he's getting better. Maybe a year from now, we're not talking about him in that light. But I think that Donovan Mitchell coming off of last season is somebody that I would still want to buy stock in.
Historically, age 29 is the peak, right? Like, every player has slightly different, and the way they rise and the way they decline flattens or get sharp or whatever. But when you're 29, as a general rule, once you hit 29, it starts to decline. It's only small, but like it just depends. And one of the things you can talk about, and this is, you mentioned all those things. It's very easy to see those things that you said when you look at the numbers, because he went from being someone that per 75 possessions attempted over 5.5 to 6 attempts at the rim. Last season, 4.6. All right, that's one shot at the rim. Obviously, the more efficient shot. He also shot under 60% from the rim when he'd been at 65 and 63 the last 2 seasons. So not only did he start taking fewer shots at the rim, they just didn't go in. And when you're talking about driving efficiency numbers, get to the rim and finish at the rim. They're the things that push those numbers up. He also went into a situation where the last 2 seasons, his mid-range shooting has dipped again, another 2-3 percentage points. That was the same as the year before. But when you change the mix and his mid-range shot attempts go up by 1 per game, your shots at the rim drop down by 1 per game, and then you don't finish at the rim, well, that causes all those things. And that's exactly what you said. Getting to the rim is hard. Like, it puts pressure on your body. You've got to, you push in there, you get knocked down, you get the free throws. All of that stuff happens. And if you're preserving your body, you're going to settle for more threes. You're going to settle for more easier looks. You're going to give it to other players who are bigger in at the rim. So while he might have to shoulder that little bit of extra load when Garland is out, I do expect that some of that trend perhaps continues, and he doesn't beat himself up, because again, you're a smaller guy. You don't want to get the shit kicked out of you the entire game, and then the next game you can't move and your knee's busted. And we saw the season before, post All-Star break, like, his knee was done. Like, he just couldn't do anything realistically. Like, his time off, his minutes were down. He couldn't really get anything going because he'd been so beaten up. And I think that this not necessarily is the new norm, but this slight tweak, which results in what we saw last season, is probably something that is going to have to happen, even if he's still the elite player. There's just these small little changes that happen, and being able to identify those things is interesting for us from my fantasy perspective, but also in making the Cavs a better squad, which is obviously what they did last season. So I'm excited to see what Mitchell can bring this upcoming year, Danny, and how that changes. Now, I do want to get into that part that you talked about in the centers, because that is now where we're at, because we saw Evan Mobley, and I'm glad you brought him up, because I was huge on Evan Mobley as a draft prospect. I had him as the second best player in that class. I had him as the rookie of the year after that draft class. There were some people who were getting pretty down on him, so it was a pretty good year for me to be like, I'm big into Evan Mobley. I loved seeing that, right? What we also saw last season is, and you mentioned already, Jarrett Allen, he just stopped blocking shots for whatever reason. His minutes were down, and that is when their primary backup center was whatever Tristan Thompson is. And whatever Tristan Thompson is Cavs legend, whatever, nightclub legend also, but also not a real NBA player at this point in his career. You could argue that Larry Nance is not particularly great and he's always hurt, and that is true, but Larry Nance is a real backup center. He is a real contributor who's been a winning player in many situations. When he had to step up in Atlanta last season, he did. And now, you referenced him already, like, he comes in here as a legitimate player. You've already sort of touched on it, but like, what does that mean for, say, Jarrett Allen's role with having an actual living, breathing, real player as the backup center now that can easily push Allen into a smaller role?
I think it could mean fewer minutes for him, because I think that this gives Larry Nance, and again, the same as Lonzo Ball, comes with the health caveat, because he did not play very many games last season, and Larry Nance has dealt with some injury issues throughout his career, as you mentioned. But he gives the Cavs a different look, and he gives the Cavs the ability to stay big while having 4 shooters around Evan Mobley, because of how good Larry Nance Jr. has been as a shooter, albeit not on the most significant volume in the world, but he has developed a pretty reliable 3-point shot. So I look at that and think, well, he can play both the 4 and the 5, which is not something Tristan Thompson could do. He was strictly a center at this point in his career, so he could not play alongside Jarrett Allen. I think Larry Nance can play a little bit alongside Jarrett Allen, but I also think that he can play alongside Evan Mobley, which is arguably more important here, because with him on the floor, it gives the Cavs a different look than what they've been able to have over the past several years. Maybe it looks a little similar to what they had that year, Kevin Love's final full season in Cleveland, when he finished, I believe, runner-up or third for Sixth Man of the Year, came off the bench, did a lot of those really good things as the third big. Don't know that he was necessarily the center that I would expect Larry Nance Jr. to be able to be at this point in his career, but I do look at that and say, okay, this is something that could change some of the lineups that the Cavs have. It can give Kenny Atkinson a little bit more lineup flexibility. And one of the things that we saw in the regular season last year was the Cavs were willing at times to close games with Jarrett Allen on the bench. And that's a really difficult thing to do with a guy that has made an all-star team in the past, that had, I don't think he should have been an all-star last year, but I do think he had an argument to be discussed as an all-star last year. It's hard to do that with him, but they were willing to do it. And I think now when they have a third big, that tells me they might even be a little bit more willing to do that. So I look at this and just think, things might be a little bit different for Jarrett Allen.
Jarrett Allen, again, you can look at the numbers that he put up during the season, and as I said, he just doesn't block shots anymore for whatever reason. But over the second half of the year, over the final 30 games of the year, he played 26 minutes a night, and it just kept going down and down. And over the last month of the year, he was down to 25 minutes a night. Like, it's a drop. He only ended up playing 28 minutes. He played all 82 games, so he wasn't hurt. Like, obviously, there was some bits towards the end there where they were saying just get out there for the sake of being out there, so you play all 82, including less than 1 minute in the final game. But they were consistently limiting his playing time. There were games where he played more, and there are games when he played 22 minutes. And now, this is my worry with considering where Jarrett Allen is going to be and the production that he has for this season, is that when you've got another legit option in Nance out there, plus a full season of DeAndre Hunter to play the four also, is that where does Allen go? And I guess that is the next part of it is, do they consider, is he, they don't want to trade him because he's good, and having that player there is useful, but it becomes a stage where it becomes somewhat expendable when you use a 24, 25 minute a night pseudo starting center.
So I don't think that he's somebody that the Cavs should be interested in trading this season. I think who the Cavs are right now is who they should be. And you very rarely see championship caliber teams make big trades during the regular season. It just does not happen all that often. So I would be very surprised. Now, that said, I think this is a different conversation next July. I do think that is maybe the time when you start to think about the Cavs maybe dealing Jarrett Allen. And part of it is too, he's making $20 million a year this year, which is very reasonable for the production that he provides. But next year that goes up to $28 million. And, if his production does not improve, and I wouldn't expect it to, because I would expect Evan Mobley's production to improve, and there's just only so much production available to be done, I would think that he's not the same bargain at that number as he is right now. So I wouldn't anticipate that the Cavs are going to deal him this season. I do think that next offseason, there will be a lot of chatter about that. And I think it's a very real possibility at that point, depending on how this year goes.
Barring an injury, which you can never really factor that in, would you say that it is very likely that he plays fewer than the 28 minutes he played last season, Jarrett Allen?
I think that's probably, I would say slightly below. I think that he will be somewhere between probably 25 and 27 minutes. I do think, though, factoring into that, the end of the season last year, and there were some nights last year where Jarrett Allen just didn't have it. He wanted to play all 82 games, and the Cavs honored that request of his. He wanted to prove that he could do it. But there were nights, especially the second night of some back-to-backs, where just it looked like Jarrett Allen did not belong on the floor. He looked gassed. He looked like he was giving nothing. Not in terms of effort, but just didn't have anything in the tank. And I do think that is something that played into his minutes being a little bit lower, probably played into his production being a little bit lower too.
Let's talk about Evan Mobley just to finish this off, because obviously he took a big step forward. He was right up there in Defensive Player of the Year. You mentioned made all second team NBA. He made the All-Star game for the first time. He played still like everyone, only 31 minutes, but he averaged 19 points. His shot blocking numbers went up. His passing numbers were strong. He started to hit threes at a better level, 37% now for 2 consecutive years after being 25 or under in the first 2 years of his career. So he sort of figured that out. The volume's not exceptionally high, but also another one of these players that as the season went on, he started taking a lot more threes. The three-point attempt rate was at 25% for the season, but over the final 2 months of the year, he was up at 32% in terms of his attempt rate. So they really brought that into the game a little bit more. Do you think that we get a situation where he is more of that three-point shooter? Is there more room for him to get more usage this season? Like, what's the next evolution here for Evan Mobley?
So I think the next evolution, if we're just strictly talking about his game, I think the next evolution is tightening up his handle and getting to the rim a little bit more on his own, not needing other guys to, create those opportunities for him. And I think that there are times where you watch him, it's like, you know what? And he's been able to get to the rim. But there are times where you watch him and you go, you know what? They probably should have taken one or two fewer dribbles. Like, you should have been able to get there faster. And I think that is what's next for him. But as far as his three-point shooting goes, I do think that the volume that he was at the end of the season is here to stay. So there was a game, it was, I believe, in early December. He scored 41 points against the Charlotte Hornets. He was 6 of 8 on three-pointers in that game. He made 5 three-pointers in the first quarter. Prior to that game, he was shooting 34% on threes on, I believe it was 2.1 per game. After that game, he shot just under 38% on threes in just under 4 attempts per game. I think that is much closer to who Evan Mobley is going to be for the complete and full season this year than what he was last year for, yes, a large chunk of it. Like, that's 49 games. It's not a small sample size. But I do think that he's going to be somebody that shoots probably around 5 3-pointers per game this season is where I would estimate his volume is from beyond the arc.
I can tell you exactly what I've got him projected to shoot if I can find the number. 4.5 threes a game. So yeah, around that mark. And he was at 3.2 last season. So I do think that some of that extra stuff is going to stick in that as well, which of course drops his overall field goal down, but his overall efficiency and where he can impact the game and his overall scoring, I think, will bump him up. And it is going to be interesting to see him. Like, is this the season? Maybe you could say this has already happened, but is this the season he becomes the Cavs' best all-around player? Like, I think that's probably what they would hope and not necessarily need, but like if he can elevate to be that guy, obviously defensively he's there, and then he can become that offensive guy as well. Like, this maybe is that year, it's year 5, and you can start to be that player, even though you don't really look at a guy who scores 19 a game as being the team's best player. But I think that this might be that year that he pushes at least into a more serious discussion there.
The Cavaliers are a team that has championship aspirations for this season. They believe internally that they can win the title next June. I think a lot of people, it's not easy to win the title, obviously, but I do think people believe it is possible for them. Just if you watch basketball, like you say, I could see the Cavs winning the title. For that to happen, Evan Mobley, there has to at least be a discussion next summer about Evan Mobley's actually the best guy in the Cavs, not Donovan Mitchell. Or maybe it's not a runaway thing because Donovan Mitchell, as we already talked about, I think is going to peak this year. He's still awesome. But I think if the Cavs win the title or reach the finals, we are at least having the discussion. Hey, actually, is Evan Mobley better than Donovan Mitchell? And if that is the case, you're looking at having 2 of the 10 to 12 best players in basketball on the team, and I think that's a pretty good place to be.
I agree, and it is going to be interesting. One last quick little question, which is not really related to any of this, but I think you're losing some of the players that they did lose, like losing Ty Jerome. Obviously, Isaac Okoro is gone. There are some minutes that are opening up. We've already talked about Lonzo Ball. He's not particularly reliable, but there are 2 players that I think have an interest of maybe jumping in as a rotation player. One of them you mentioned is Craig Porter Jr. The other one is first-round pick last season, Jalen Tyson. Who do you think is more likely to be a regular every night part of the rotation?
So I think that Craig will pick up minutes early in the season with Darius out. There's just a bigger need at point guard, but I do think that Jalen Tyson is somebody that the Cavs that they view as somebody that maybe at one point could be the 5th starter on a really good team, or could be the 7th guy on a really good team. So I do think that if he has a good training camp and, he had a good summer league out in Vegas a couple of months ago, he was shut down after a few games, played very well, certainly not in the role that you would expect him to be with the Cavaliers because he has the basketball in his hands much more frequently in that type of setting. But I look at him and say, he's somebody that should be the 10th guy. Can he be the 10th guy? Especially because, listen, all of these guys are not going to play 82 games. We know that. No. But can he be flexible enough positionally to where if Lonzo Ball is out, he can fill in some there. If DeAndre Hunter is out, he can fill in there. If Max Strus is out, he can fill in there. He can fill in a bunch of different spots. Is that something that is possible?
when they drafted him, like, he was a guy that was a bit of a late riser for me in terms of draft prep stuff. And I basically said, all right, Karis LeVert is an unrestricted free agent. He has this sort of ball handling, pseudo point guard, wing size, shooter, sort of defender role on the bench. I believe they'll be looking to move off of Karis LeVert and Jalen Tyson, that they would groom him for that 6-man role who can start. Then, of course, LeVert was traded, so it changed things. But I still think that's what he can do. He can be that Karis LeVert archetype player who starts, that sometimes he comes off the bench. He probably won't be playing 27 minutes a night this season, but in that sort of I could easily see him jumping into that in year 3 or year 4 of being that guy who's able to do just bits and pieces of all of those things offensively. And like you said, in some league, I love to see this when guys can ramp up what they do. Hey, you want to pull back and be a low usage player that's a connector? Do it. You need, there's 3 starters are sitting and you're putting into a larger role and you're going to have a 25 usage on, go for it. And I think he can sort of be that guy that moves back and forth. He's an interesting name to watch, Danny, but of course you're going to cover him and the rest of the Cavs. I'm not sure you're going to have a huge amount of Luke Travers talk, but you're going to have all that on Locked On Cavs for this upcoming season. So thanks again for coming on and chatting with me about the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
And that's the Cavs. Again, be very cautious about Garland and how long he's going to be out, and then how slow the ramp up is. Be very cautious about Jarrett Allen. Be very cautious about Jarrett Allen, just in how they use him. Just be careful about it. Guys, hit the subscribe button, thumb it up, leave your comments down below. We're done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.